Hey everybody, welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. I'm here in my front yard and I want to talk about a couple of things that we've been noticing that's been going on with our planters here. They look absolutely beautiful and they've been doing really well, but we've noticed that we're having an issue with some of our Supertunias and they're starting to get a budworm and also aphids. So if you've had problems with any of these pests or aphids or anything like budworms, you know how frustrating that can be. But in this case, with budworms and with aphids, there's something that we can do about it. And the best part is we can do it without harming a lot of other beneficials. And so what we have here is we have our beautiful Supertunia Vista Snowdrift, and you can tell from a couple of weeks ago I took some footage of this. They're just absolutely beautiful, super lush, full from top to bottom. You can barely see any kind of green in the underneath the bloom canopy. And then now, after we've had some issues with budworms and also a little bit of stress caused by aphids, you can definitely tell that they've cut back in their production of blooms because the budworms have been eating the blooms and also the aphids have been stressing them out, which means they've been sucking that really beneficial nutrients that it takes to push blooms and to thrive in the garden. Now, this is the beginning of September and we have a lot of time left in our garden. By no means am I ready to pull these out yet, even though fall's right around the corner and I know a lot of us are thinking about our fall plantings and things like that. These are going to do just fine. In fact, the Super Beano Whiteout is doing beautifully, just going along, doing what it does best, full of blooms, super green. And so if I can get these Supertunia Snowdrift back on track and take care of those horrible pests that are causing problems, especially at the end of the planter right here. Not so much in this area, but over here they seem to be having the most issue. Then I can get a lot more time out of the garden and it'll probably go all the way through November into December, and that's exactly what we want to have happen. So these plants are extremely hardy. They bounce back beautifully. I could even give them a little bit of a trim on the front because they are kind of cascading over the side of the planter, which I think looks great. But I could give them a trim which would stimulate even more growth, and I might in fact do that, but not today. What we're going to do today is I'm going to show you exactly what I do. And there's a lot of different things that people do online that you can look at, but what I do in my garden is super simple. I use one of two things. I usually use BT, which is very specific to budworms, or I use Captain Jack's Dead Bug, and that is a more broad spectrum. Both of these methods that I use are great for organic gardening, and I really like to shy away from harsh chemicals that have lasting effects on the planters, the ground, the beneficials, the environment. So these things that I'm using are very benign and they don't cause problems with animals or anything like that. So I really like to keep them on hand just in case I need them. And last year I was spraying pretty much preventatively, like once a week, but I've noticed that this year I haven't had to do that, so I've cut down. Even though it's organic spraying, mind you, I've cut down on my spraying just a little bit more. And since I've been busy, I have neglected to notice that I was starting to have a problem, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and spray it and they will come back for sure. So let's take a look at the method that I use, and I will show you exactly how this works. All right, we're here in the backyard and I have my three go-to remedies for any kind of bug situation that we deal with here in Southern California. I do know that everywhere in different regions you might deal with different issues in your garden, but here the main ones that we deal with are budworms, aphids, and spider mites. So upon closer look to those plants in the front, I realized that I'm not having so much of an aphid problem, but I do have some spider mites starting on some of my plants back there, especially my boxwoods. So in that case, for spider mites, I would still use the dead bug, and I could use that on the petunias and also all of the plants out there to kind of handle those issues, because it is more broad spectrum and it does take care of those things. So in this case, I would use my 1 gallon, because I do have a small yard, my 1 gallon sprayer here. I would use my tablespoon measure, and I just have these left over from when I had the Proven Winners water soluble fertilizer. I keep them so that I can measure this, and it's perfect because I can throw them out when they get gross and they get old. So it's an easy thing, and I can reuse things that I normally wouldn't be able to reuse. So anyways, in this case, I would use 4 tablespoons per gallon to make sure that I had the exact right measurement there. So the next one that I use, if I'm really having a budworm issue, I use this Thuricide, which is otherwise known as BT, and it works really well, and it's very specific to just caterpillars, and it works by interrupting the digestive system of the caterpillars. So what happens is they ingest and they still eat the flowers for just, a little while longer, and then once they eat them, they've obviously been sprayed with this, so it upsets their digestive system, and they in essence starve and then fall off. And I really like using these if I'm not having any other issues, because it is specific and it takes care of it beautifully. So this can be used on your petunias or any other flower that you're having issues with budworms. Also, it can be used, I know that somebody was asking if it can be used on tomatoes, and I do believe so, but you might want to read into that a little bit further before you ever do that on anything that's edible, even though this is for organic gardening. I would just double check up on that. And then the last one that I use for my roses, and this is wonderful for if you have black spot, or in fact if you do have aphids or spider mites, this takes care of those great. Now a couple months ago I had for the first time a real issue with black spot, where some of my roses were really suffering with black spot on the leaves or on the canes even. And so what I did was I came through and whacked them pretty severely, even though it wasn't time for them to go dormant. I wanted to get all of that dead infected branching or stems off of there, and then I sprayed with this, and it worked great. They came back beautifully, and I haven't had any issues with that. So this is really great for spider mites and aphids, and it works great on all flowers, not just roses. Even though it is labeled Rose RX, it's great for all flowering plants. And I've even used it on my boxwoods as well when I'm not using the dead bug. And like I said before, last year I sprayed preventatively, and I do that still on occasion, but I'm not spraying per week like I had been before. It could be every 2 to 3 weeks. Now, if I see an infestation or a problem area, I'm going to go ahead and spray. But other than that, it's been pretty helpful. And once I see those problem spots, you just come through, spray them, and it's gone within a couple of days. I knew that I was having an issue because I started to see the leaves of the plant. And once that starts happening, that's usually a sign that you've got something going on. So upon further inspection, in fact, I did see some worms on there, and I was like, man, I got to get these things sprayed. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to go through, I'm going to use the Captain Jack's dead bug, because I am seeing a little bit of spider mites on some of the boxwoods out there, so I'll be able to spray those too, and I don't have to do multiple different kinds of insecticide. Although these are organic, I try to keep it to a minimum, and that will take care of the problem. And then in a couple weeks, those green leaves will hopefully turn into a large amount of blooms, and they'll be back to normal. I may even trim them a little bit later, but yeah, I want to get as much time out of the bloom cycle as possible, especially since we're still technically at the tail end of summer. But here in Southern California, those things are going to still bloom all the way into the fall. So let's go get those taken care of. I'm going to get this ready, and then we can spray out there in the front. I typically wait until dusk so that I can make sure that I don't have any other beneficials flying around, although this is pretty much harmless to many of the other beneficial insects that are out there. I just try to not do that so that I don't chance it, because we want to keep those beneficials in our garden, because there's a lot of insects that are great for our garden that we don't want to harm for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to shake this really well. I'm going to take the measure. It's super simple. My tablespoon measure, and I'm going to measure 4 tablespoons right directly in here. 2 and 3 and 4. Make sure this is closed completely. Fill this 1 gallon up to its mark. Pressure this to where it's ready and primed, and we're going to go in the front, and I'm going to spray these. You'll see me do that right now. All right, here we go. All right, so I'm simply going to prime this up with some air. It's pretty full, so it doesn't take very long. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to spray, making sure that it's really dripping and every bud is covered with it, and it also drips down in the main canopy. So it's pretty simple. Just take this, spray it across, making sure that we get way down in the canopy there. Every bud is covered, and this will take care of that. And it's pretty much simple as that. Now that I notice that I'm having some budward issues on also my boxwoods, I'm just going to spray that as well, making sure that I'm spraying underneath the leaves right here, and coming in and making sure that that's all nice and taken care of down inside. So that's basically it. Fill it up with the correct measurement, and then come through and spray them until it's really dripping and it's completely covered. This way we have a better chance of handling those awful pests that decimate our blooms in the garden. So I'm going to finish this right now. So now I'm also spraying my verbena out here because I have noticed that sometimes if I have a spider mite issue, it does spread to the verbena, unfortunately. In this case, I'll go ahead and spray those to where it kind of takes care of all that. And if I'm spraying, I might as well do the whole thing so I have good coverage and I give the entire garden the best chance of a rebound in blooms. So we're just going to finish this up, and then it'll be all set. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll hopefully see a big difference. All right, so that's pretty much it. As you can tell, it's relatively simple. Like I said before, it is rated for organic gardening. So in that sense, it does give you a little bit of peace of mind, especially since we are spraying something. We want to make sure that it's as safe as possible. I know that gives me peace of mind anyway. So not that we're saying we can't ever use the more harsh chemicals. Sometimes there are uses for that, but if we can avoid it as much as possible, then it's better for everybody, including yourself. So we really thank you for stopping by today to see what we've got going on in our garden. And sometimes we have these issues that come up, but there's things that we can do about them for sure. So until next time, we thank you for being here, and we hope to see you again very soon. Bye-bye, everybody.